So good morning, everybody, and there's an awful lot of us today. So, fantastic to see. I'm blaming it on the fact that it's actually raining, so people aren't outside in the garden. That's what I'm putting it down to. Or at least it's certainly raining in Birmingham. My name's Matthew Baird. I'm the founder of Baird & Co Recruitment, which partners with District 4. So I've been doing social housing recruitment now for over 11 years. Absolutely love it. Have kind of recruited from support workers through to chief execs. So if you do need any support, this stays constantly free because so many of you use me for your recruitment. So do reach out if you need any support with that. Apologies, my throat is a little bit sore today. I did go to the Ashes on Friday and then on Sunday and then yesterday. So I'm a little bit sore in the throat, but I've had a phenomenal weekend. So I'm very, very fortunate to have done so. Luckily, you won't be hearing from me too much today because I'm joined by Clare Paterson, who, for anybody who has been to my roundtables before will recognise Clare. Anytime the word data comes up, I immediately look towards Clare. But more importantly, this is a topic which really, really needs talking about. And as soon as you introduced it, initially I was like, oh, I didn't know this was a thing. And then I've obviously advertised it and I'm like, this is clearly a thing because everybody wants to come and talk about it. So without further ado, Clare, I'm going to pass over to you to A, make your own introductions about your brilliant self, and B, I guess, introduce today's topic and I guess start the conversation. To anyone who is new to the roundtable, do feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. Dave has just said it's gloriously sunny in Edinburgh, so, oh, brilliant. Do feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. When it comes to the actual discussion part, feel free to use the reactions, raise hand gesture thing, and I will bring you into the conversation at any time. Or if you don't want to actually come onto camera, then just put something in the chat and I will bring your point into it. But without further ado, Clare, over to you.
Thank you very much, Matt. And no pressure there with what a brilliant build-up and a brilliant introduction. Thank you very much. So I'll tell you a bit more about my background in a minute when I jump into the presentation. But just to say that, yes, I absolutely love coming to these social housing roundtable sessions. And absolutely, as Matt says, whenever the word data is said, I'm right in there usually. And if I'm not, it's because I'm at the hairdresser or something and I can't speak straight away. So because I always try and at least listen in. So yes, this absolutely is a thing. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll talk about we will talk about what it is, what this thing is that we're here.
Sharing is working, you'll be pleased to hear.
Okay, can you see full screen now? Housing Ombudsman.
See full screen.
Okay, cool. Let's hide my thumbnail. I don't want to look at myself. Okay. So it is a huge report. I don't know if any of you have read the whole thing, but it's interesting to a data geek like myself. So there I am with my hair done properly once I've been to the hairdresser. But this is my background. I have worked for 25 years. I've noticed most of my bios say 20 plus years. I think I can safely say 25 years now in quality assurance, health and safety, moving into governance, risk management, and then landing in data protection as a speciality. But I still housing, started off in manufacturing, moved into housing and worked at Bromford for 12 years. And I've continued to work with social housing since I left Bromford, which is almost 6 years ago. So that makes me almost 2 decades in social housing as well. So the thing that ties all of these together is data. Data is important in all of these, and it's what they're all based on as well. You can't measure quality or health and safety or manage risks or do anything in governance unless you have data. And I often call back to the skills that I learned in my quality assurance certifications and health and safety certifications, even now that I'm working in data protection, because there's so many useful tools in all of those areas, and I go back to them still. And I think that's what makes me quite unique in data protection. I pull everything together. I'm not just looking at, well, the GDPR says this and just telling you what it says, because that's not very useful. And I know, I have no delusion about this. I know that data protection and GDPR can feel like red tape. It can feel a bit scary, like an obstacle even when we're faced with all the issues that we are faced with in social housing at the moment. But I'm on a mission to turn that perspective around and show you how it's actually one of the main building blocks of getting social housing right in so many ways. And I would like to be able to help you do that as well. So we're all aware of the tragic case at Rochdale Borough-wide Housing, where a 2-year-old Awab Ishak died, and there was the coroner's report, and then of course there was the Housing Ombudsman report as well. And the Ombudsman said that they found, or we found a culture of othering of the residents lies at the heart of the issues, exclusion and marginalisation. And this pattern was exacerbated by an extremely poor data culture. And then the Housing Ombudsman has gone on to release, a couple of weeks ago, their first Spotlight report on not just a service area, or not even a service area, but on a root cause of so many of the service area failings that they find. So they've called it a Spotlight report on knowledge and information management, and they're calling it KIM. Now, this is a new one to me. I've heard about records management and data management and data governance and all the rest of it, but this is a new one to me that they're calling it KIM. And to be honest, I feel very sorry for anyone working in housing who is called Kim, because I've known some lovely Kims in social housing who are absolutely not causing any problems, in fact the opposite. But nevertheless, they've called it Kim, and they explain in the report why they want to call it knowledge and information management, because that does encompass so much. And the report also says that while the consequences of Grenfell and Rochdale were extreme, the latest Spotlight report demonstrates that poor knowledge and information management, or KIM, is routine across the sector, and it is causing daily detriment to residents. I have got a link later on to the Spotlight report itself. It's well worth reading in its entirety when you get a spare couple of hours. But I am going to keep writing more and more blog posts about it as well, to highlight some of the issues in there. Some of the case studies especially are frustrating through to heartbreaking, that the lack of being able to put their hands on information has caused so much trouble to residents. There's even a case study in there, I think there's more than one actually, where the Housing Ombudsman has tried to investigate a complaint, as they do, and the Housing Association hasn't been able to respond, and hasn't responded because they can't get any information. So they've not even been able to do a fair response to that complaint, because they don't know and they can't prove what they did or didn't do, which again, so frustrating. And there's a big recommendation in there from the Housing Ombudsman that we recommend landlords implement a KIM strategy, knowledge and information management strategy, which is such an easy thing to say, but is absolutely not an easy thing to do. So there's the link. You'll get a link to this presentation as well, and that's a hyperlink, so that will take you there. And I'm sure Matt will share the links and anything else that's useful if you want to read that yourself. But as I say, I'm writing a lot about it, so keep an eye on what I'm writing about. So it's huge. So where do we start? And again, coming from the report, senior leaders need to be clear about the importance of knowledge and information management and their standards and expectations. So why is it important? Why do we care about knowledge and information management? And it all comes down to decision making. We talk a lot in social housing about being data driven. Well, that's kind of a bit of a soundbite, and it doesn't really mean anything, but it's about data driven decision making. It's making decisions about the customer experience, how we manage employees, how we manage our assets and our investments, all the financial things. We can't make any decisions, boards through to frontline staff who are making, quick decisions day in, day out. And at the other end, you've got the board making slower decisions. It's all based on data. What do we know? What knowledge and information have we got in front of us that we can access and use to make these decisions? To me, that's the most important thing. And then it will be up to every organisation to decide what good looks like, what their standards and expectations are, what's good, better, best. What do we need as an organisation so that we can make decisions about those 4 areas? And we have got huge amounts of information. We've talked before on here, the Social Housing Roundtable, about how we are data rich, insight poor. Do we have too much data is one of the topics I've talked about before. And we have all this information already. We do not need to go out and do lots more data collection, in my opinion. We have a lot of data, but it's all intertwined, isn't it? We have information about the people, the assets and finances, people being customers and employees, and they're all intertwined. And around all of that, we've got our processes, what we do and how we do it. They all impact on each other. Everything's a bit of a mishmash. So where do we go from there? So, like I said, I've got 25-ish years in all these areas that involve data. And there are models in every one of these areas. That, from Plan, Do, Check, Act through to, I can't remember the health and safety one, but it's purpose, organisation, policy, so on and so on. There are models in data governance, there are models in GDPR. And through all my work over the last few years, I've kind of kept finding and refining models and found that naturally I kept coming back to these 6 pillars, starting with purpose, and everything else, whether it's data protection, governance, risk management, health and safety, quality assurance. I worked in development in social housing as well for a few years. Everything works if you base it on these 6 pillars. I'm not saying there aren't other models that work, of course, but this is where I just naturally ended up. And everything works under these headings. So you can apply this model, and I do, to any level of project, any size of project, through to a whole organisation. So you choose where you're going to put it or apply it. In terms of knowledge and information management, if you are implementing a strategy like the Ombudsman has recommended, then there are, these are the levels at which you would look at this. Everything starts with purpose though, but we would be looking at why do we do what we're doing and what job is the data doing? Then start thinking about who's got ownership and responsibility, how we need to manage risks. For our processes, what does good look like in terms of managing our knowledge and information? How do we embed and maintain best practice? And then how do we continually improve? Are we actually driving decisions with our data? Is it the right data and is it good data? And the 2 biggest recommendations in the Kim report from the Housing Ombudsman are about these 2 things. It's start with a strategy, which has to start with purpose. And everything about the report is about purpose. Why do we work in social housing? Why do housing associations exist? And then why should the data exist? And what should What job should it be doing? And then who owns all of these responsibilities? That's actually, I think it's number one in the list of recommendations, is decide about governance. How are you going to oversee this? So those of you who have seen me talk before will know that I talk about baking in data protection. So you might think, why am I talking about all sorts of data? Shouldn't I stick to just data protection? Why am I concerning myself with asset data and finance data, not just people data? Well, it's because it is so entwined in everything that we do in social housing. You can't separate them. And something that people don't always get about data protection, it's quite often misunderstood. It is all about purpose. It all starts with purpose. You can't say data is compliant. There's no such thing as compliant personal data. It's only compliant based on the purpose. Only purposes can be compliant. So you need to know what that purpose is for having that data right from the start. And that applies to people data, asset data, and finance data. So if you were baking a cake, not baking an egg, baking a cake, the eggs go in at the start. If you've forgotten to put the eggs in and you bring the cake out of the oven, you wouldn't accept somebody just going, don't worry, we'll crack an egg over the top of it. It'll be absolutely fine. And it's exactly the same with purpose. We can't do anything properly unless we start with purpose. If we go off without thinking about purpose, everything will have to be unpicked, unless we've been very lucky and we've landed in the right place anyway. But that's why a lot of my work is unpicking things. A lot of data protection professionals' work is unpicking things. It's part of why we're quite unpopular, I think, because we will say, we'll get what people think is a simple question and say, how do we explain this in our privacy notice? And we have to say, well, why are you doing it? Whatever the it is, what is its purpose? And we have to go back to the start, and we might need to unpick a few things. We are often asked to put that compliance over the top, and you absolutely can't. It has to be baked in from the purpose from the start. Again, another reason why people kind of think, well, why are you getting involved in other areas? Data protection is just about security, isn't it? It's about so much more. It's about data quality. It's about risk management, supply chain management. It's about transparency. And at its core, it's about defending human rights, which is something that everyone in housing world, or most of us, are interested in and are supportive of. And why I say that data protection and GDPR and all the other legislation should be your new best friend, really, is because if you look past all the technical jargon, there's a lot of misrepresentation. Even from the data protection regulator, sometimes there's a little bit of focus is put on things that you think, that's a bit weird. All the headlines are usually wrong about data protection and GDPR. So understandably, there's a lot of misunderstanding. If you go past all of those, at its core, the GDPR is a data management framework that fits really well in that model that I naturally keep coming back to. It tells us that data needs to be accurate and up to date and shouldn't be stored forever. It's so much more than just security. Security is absolutely crucial as well, of course, but at its core, because it's about purpose, you can apply it to absolutely everything. So I think GDPR is a really good framework to start with if you are looking at, a blank piece of paper. Where do we start with a KIM strategy? A couple of pitfalls to avoid, and then I will open up to discussion. I know that we've, I could talk about this all day, as you know. So anyone a fan of Just a Minute on Radio 4, where the contestants speak for a minute on a topic? I could do data protection. And avoid hesitation, deviation, or repetition. That's actually really good advice in so many projects or policies or implementation, to avoid hesitation, deviation, and repetition. So in the report, again, the Ombudsman says this can feel like another thing on an already impossible to-do list. Completely understand that. But poor information management is such a strong recurring theme that it's actually the closest thing the sector could get to a silver bullet. Now, I don't agree with him calling it a silver bullet. Silver bullet is generally thought of as a simple solution to a complex problem. And there is nothing simple about a KIM strategy. But it is urgent. We do need to move on this. How do we stay on track? The same with any project. We look at what changes are going to give us the biggest bang for our buck, so we can allocate the most resource to those. Avoid shiny object syndrome, something I am very prone to. The next exciting thing, or, oh, look, there's a squirrel, look, there's a new gadget, all those things. We need to try and avoid those. And absolutely keep coming back to that point of purpose. We start with purpose and it should all build on purpose. There are 21 recommendations in the KIM report. It could be tempting to cherry pick them and go for the easiest ones first, but we need to look across them all. They are in these five headings, 5 boxes I've put them in, and we need to apply them all in the order that will get the most effect from them. Again, the way I am, I would absolutely love to cherry pick and go for the easiest, but we need to delve into it a little bit more and look at what's going to give us the biggest bang for our buck. And the Ombudsman again says avoid repetition, as in avoid repeating mistakes. We are so busy every day that we just keep dealing with the next fire. So let's put a stop to that and get on top of this now. But also avoid having too many cooks. That is a problem that definitely crops up. It could be too many people involved, or it could be too many versions of data. It could be too many systems. That happened at Rochdale, that the information about the family was in different systems, but not everyone had access to it. So wherever we can, avoid repeating processes and effort and data collection. Slim everything down as much as possible. So, excuse me, a little bit of a roadmap that picks up the things that the recommendations are telling us, as well as, and you know, it naturally fits into that model, my 6 pillars already. And of course, you can get help to do it as well, and that's something that I can do. And I've been speaking to Golden Marzipan about working with them as well, to maybe work with clients together, to kind of put people on a roadmap to doing that kind of thing. So if you go away with nothing else from this, go away with this image. The egg is purpose for your data, and you can't add that at the end. You absolutely do not want a raw egg over your beautiful Victoria sponge. So that's me. There are loads of places to find me, so please do. And connect with me on LinkedIn if we're not already connected, and all the rest of it. And I'll come back into the room.
That was a very swift. You're a bit like me there, Claire, going, this is a way to get in touch with me. Okay, bye.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not good at the selling bit.
It will absolutely be up on LinkedIn for all. I am in the process as well. I had a chat with someone who's in the room today, so that from now on, actually, a number of our recordings and stuff, I'm going to get subtitles and things added to the session so that more people can join in for hard of hearing, which is going to be great. And I'll make sure that gets uploaded to YouTube. But for now, firstly, thank you so much, Claire, because that was really, really insightful. And a lot of people actually really enjoying the baking analogy. And I think that's it. Sometimes making it simplistic for people is exactly where it's about. Judith Radcliffe had mentioned that the individual owns their data. Housing associations and others are just responsible for looking after it. And I think that's a really powerful point to look after. Yeah, Dave, as a number of said, have kind of brilliant and really, really grateful. So I want to start off kicking off questions. If people want to start putting them in the chat or raising your hand, please do. But I guess from an overall perspective, Claire, did you feel that this report was, do we feel it's a really good report? Do we feel it was an overdue report regurgitating the same things we've kind of heard before? Do we feel it was necessary to kind of revamp it? What are your thoughts on the report itself as a whole, while people are coming up with wider questions for the sector?
I actually think it's a really good report. It includes so many case studies, and you can't get better data than real life, can you? It makes a lot of sense. I think there are pitfalls that we could, as a sector, cherry pick from the recommendations. I think there are probably too many recommendations to tackle in one go. There needs to be some sort of, prioritising and, chunking them down. And like I say, analysing to see which will give us the best impact. But I think that having a strategy and being clear on governance are absolutely key and should be the starting points. And yeah, I think it was overdue. I think it was needed because, like the Ombudsman says themselves, they're seeing this over and over and over again, that it's lack of data management, quite often about people. So it is, GDPR type territory, but asset data, finance data, all sorts of data, even just how a complaint has been dealt with, it's just being lost. It's there somewhere, but they can't get.
And that's been the question that I know you and I have discussed on this platform and others many times, is that we are such a data-rich sector, and the information is there, but the data doesn't talk to one another.
Yeah.
Or at least the systems don't talk and share the data in the way that we wish for it to. I like you say, I think it's probably overdue. Unfortunately, tragedy always befalls change. But I think what's important is the fact that at least something is being put out there. But just before I bring in Dave, do you feel like it's got the level of outreach that it's needed? Because I do feel it's kind of flown under the radar a little bit. I don't know whether or not you agree. Obviously, in your sector, obviously this was big shiny light and goodness me, what's this? But from those you're speaking with, do a lot of people know about this, or is this quite new information?
What, the report itself?
The report itself.
That it's there. I don't know, to be honest, because I've just jumped on it and
I guess those you're
dived into it. So people know about it because that I'm talking to, because I've told them, but I don't know if they already knew about it, to be honest. That's a good question. It'd be interesting to hear today, actually, the people that are here today, did you know that it existed before Matt said we were going to put this session on?
I just think it'll be an interesting one, because as always, sometimes we get this brand new thing that's brilliant, but no one knows about it, or we don't know how to implement it. Dave, thank you for coming in today. Do please join in.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks, Claire. That was wonderful. Yeah, it's now started raining. Luckily enough, I've got an umbrella above me, so thanks, Matt. You brought the ashes, doom and gloom to me. On that issue about the report, I think a lot of professionals in the area of data know about it, and technical people within the sector know about it. Unfortunately, I think a lot of executives and boards don't know about it yet, which is important. I wanted to bring to the attention of everyone, and Claire, I don't know if you've seen this. There was a fantastic announcement. They've been working on it for a little while, by GMHP, the Greater Manchester Housing Providers data framework. I don't know of anyone, or I'm sure a number of you see a few shaky heads there. Sarbani is nodding her head. So it's well worth a read. You can find the whole framework, the document, online. I'd urge everyone to look at it. It's a fantastic piece of work, and they've obviously worked hard at it. And it's. I just wanted to bring that to the attention rather than ask a question, Claire.
I should have mentioned it.
Have you seen it, Claire?
I have, yes. I was looking at it yesterday, actually.
Brilliant, isn't it?
Sidetracked me. I was looking at it, and spoke to Jovian about it. Yes, I love that it does embed data protection. It hasn't got it as another thing. It has got it data. It's just data, and we need to manage it better. yeah, it's a really good resource as well. Actually, I should have mentioned.
I was going to ask what your thoughts were on that, so that's great. Yeah, thanks. So, and maybe what I'll do is put a link to it actually on the chat. But thanks for that, and thanks, Claire.
No, appreciate it, Dave. Thank you. A question there from Judith in the chat. In what areas would you get rid of data or reduce the amount of data collected? Obviously difficult without the full facts, but in your experience, are there areas that collect too much or for the wrong purposes? Lovely question.
Yes, the short answer is yes, there are, definitely. And this is something that I talked about, I think, on my first roundtable with you, Matt, that do we have too much data in the sector? And I think that's one of the big pitfalls, that every time we get a challenge in the sector, we say, we'll fix it by collecting more data. We aren't respond, and that's one of the themes in the Spotlight report, is we're not responding properly to people's vulnerabilities. So there was a case study of a lady with 2 children with special needs, and they needed advance warning before they went into the house. She couldn't just open the door and let a stranger walk in without advance warning, and they didn't take that into account. And so when they turned up and she couldn't let them in, they put it down as she had refused to let them in. And so that was it. They'd done their job and off they went, and it never got picked up again. So that vulnerability information had been collected somewhere, but it hadn't been used. I think when people hear that story, they'll go, oh, we need to go and collect more vulnerability information. We need to know more about their children and their vulnerabilities, and why could they not let people in? And I'd say, no, absolutely, please don't. That's a knee-jerk reaction. That all we needed to know was that because of special needs, she could not let a stranger in without fair warning. And that's all we need to know. And then we need to do something about it. And that didn't happen. There's a lot of information that I think is collected in an attempt to know our customers. And this will make me very unpopular. It does make me very unpopular in social housing. We are collecting too much information in an attempt to know our customers and to know what our customers want, when actually we're not getting the basics right. We know they want safe homes, and we're not getting that right. So before we move on, in fact, I wrote a blog recently about using Maslow's hierarchy of needs to kind of look at that. You've got to get the first bit right, the basic needs right first, the safe home, before we can start thinking about what else can we offer to people.
And I think that's where your point around purpose comes back.
Yes.
It's, you've never been one, and certainly we've never had this discussion around it, but you've never been one for saying stop collecting data, or data's, there's no need for anything like that, as long as you're doing something with it.
Yes.
And that isn't just
has a purpose.
A database going, oh great, well we've now got 40% LGBTQ.
Yes.
Brilliant. Well, what are you now doing with that? Are you changing tact? Are you doing X? Are you doing Y? What is the purpose of you asking that question? Because else you're just storing information on people that's unnecessary. And actually, there's a number of points in the chat. Anna said it's that doing something we need to highlight. Massive source of frustration where residents keep telling us their information and we just ignore it. Backed up by Gary. Recommendation 6 also encompasses removing that vulnerability data when it's no longer required. And Judith, great response. Thanks, Claire. Is this about listening to customers' feedback instead of profiling them? Also, because arguably they expect their feedback to be used. Sometimes I find people like data, but don't like feedback and complaints, when complaints can be your best friend. Ellie has said, I used to handle complaints all the time where we had data, but we didn't use it. This seems to be a recurring theme in the sector, and it's one, I mean, that the roundtable has been going for kind of 2 years, definitely for 18 months strongly. And I've lost count of how many times we've said exactly that. We're having the data, we're not using it. Complaints can be your best friend. Listen, but don't just take that information and store it somewhere, do something with it. From your training and from people you're speaking with and consulting with, why do you think it is that we're still stuck in this almost rut of, oh, well, we've got the data. It's almost like data feels like a safety net when actually it's a sieve with more holes than you realise.
Yeah, I think it is a little bit off that shiny object syndrome as well, that data is a bit of a shiny object, that the more we get, it feels like a bit of a comfort blanket, like you said, when actually it's the opposite. The inspiration for, I'll explain why I'm saying this, the inspiration for me talking about Maslow's pyramid of needs, hierarchy of needs, sorry, came from watching a decluttering expert that I follow on YouTube, where she talked about this. And I think it applies to data in business the same way it applies to things in our normal lives. We have all been convinced as society that we need more and more of the things that are in the bottom couple of rungs of that hierarchy of needs, that we need not just a home, but a bigger home, a flashier home, not just transport, but bigger, flashier, more expensive, not just food, but M&S food, you know, it goes on. And unless we, and that's, you know, what marketing does for us, but as a society, we're stuck there. And the more that we get stuck in that, the harder it is to go up the hierarchy of needs to, it's like self-realization and mental security and psychological security is the word, isn't it? All those kind of things. It's harder to go up until you don't go up until you feel like you've ticked off the bottom couple of rungs. And we're being told we've never ticked off the bottom couple of rungs. So we have to keep buying and consuming more and more. And I think in business, especially in housing for some reason, data are the things that we are being convinced that we need more and more and more of it before we can get up to that self-realization and, you know, a secure community. Let's start with the basics, the purpose. And actually on the point of purpose, sorry, but I just want to commend Rochdale Borough Housing, where they have done a really good kind of response report to the Ombudsman's report on them. And they are highlighting what their purpose is, and everything's based on purpose, safe homes. And they've even stopped developing, which must have been a really difficult decision to make. But, you know, let's get those basics right first. And I'll get down off my soapbox.
This is, I mean, you talk to anybody in the sector, and I do. I mean, I talk to directors daily, heads of service, chief execs every day, every week, every month. I think a lot of people are kind of feeling like there's such a problem across the sector at the moment, they don't really know where to start. And I really liked the fact that actually in your report and in your presentation today, you pushed back on that idea of it being a silver bullet, because this isn't going to be easy. It's going to be incredibly difficult. But because it's so hard, people aren't starting. And as Gary's put in the chat, like I said before, you know, recommendation 6 encompasses removing vulnerability data that's no longer required. Well, who's taking responsibility for deciding what's required, what isn't? That's a whole job full-time by itself. Yeah. And there isn't the money to hire somebody. So someone takes that role on. Services are short elsewhere. We've got housing officers with patches that are completely unmanageable. So I guess, and this is an almost impossible question, so you're welcome for it. I appreciate your purpose, and understanding your purpose is key, but where do you actively start? Is it about restructuring? Is it looking at staff? Is it looking at kind of going, right, well, someone has to take responsibility, or do you do that later, Claire? I'm looking at this as somebody from the outside going, yeah, if I'm in charge of a housing association or a housing provider right now, and I'm looking at that, I'm going, it might be easier just to walk away. And that in itself is a problem, because we are losing so many people for that exact reason as well.
Yeah. It's absolutely about starting at what are we doing just now? Because if we don't understand how we operate just now, we can't change it to something better. So it's mapping out, which again is a huge job as well, the customer journey for starters. Eventually you'd want to do this for colleague journey as well. But I'd start with customers, because that's why we're all here, is for the customers. Start with customer journey, and actually, if you can improve the customer journey, you'll be making life easier for colleagues as well. So it's a win-win. And understand what we're doing now. That will show you where the risks are, where the deviation is, where the repetition is, you know, the just a minute the stuff. And we can start planning what the ideal would look like. We won't get to ideal straight away. So it might just be a case of, you know, we do what gives us the biggest impact first. And again, I've got a tool for this that I bang on about a lot. But it's analysing every change we could make and say, well, how much is that going to cost us, and risk and resource and everything, versus how much it's going to improve things. And is it worth doing now, or put it on the back burner, or never, like those kind of things. And going through all of those things that you could do, finding the best, biggest benefit for the lowest impact, lowest input, biggest impact, lowest input, and prioritising those actions, and not cherry picking some of the things that come out as recommendations lower down that look like they might be easier, because that's, again, I would do that. It's the human nature, but keep pulling back.
Completely fair. Thank you. I'll come back to the chat in a moment, but Sabani, good to have you with us. Please do come in.
Yes, thank you so much. First of all, Claire, thank you so much for this talk. It's really, really insightful and very well presented. I wanted to actually touch on a few points you just mentioned, and followed by Matt raised. You mentioned about the bottom of the rung, and we keep pouring it, and you know, we want to move from one house to the next house. And one of the things that we will talk, and that picture of you can't put the egg after the cake is made, that just rings so many bells. We sort of draw an analogy of hoarding and moving house as an event trigger. So something operationally that triggers a move for a system change because you want to go ahead. We always say that's the point. So you want to move to a new house, you bought a new house, and you knew you were hoarding. Guess what? An absolute fabulous time to actually declutter and see what you want to take and what you want to do. And that's the point, is where we advise, don't just look at it as a system implementation. You got to look at it from the entirety of training, experience, data, moving the data, quality, putting the governance. So, but it is still, all of that has to have what's the purpose that you want to achieve at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
So that you know, there is so much to unpick here, right? So much to unpick, and it isn't okay, we have so many recommendations, we go after that. I don't think it is that fits all. And the recommendations, it might fit, some of them might be an immediate ones for some, but might be some other set might be immediate for others. But yeah, where do you start? It's a difficult one. You have to look individually to assess where you start. But this is quite important. I mean, I'm glad that we are talking about it, because that's, I think, is the first step towards people actioning on it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Savani. I completely, yes, it's so much like decluttering, isn't it? That's when we mostly go through and get rid of things. And when we go, do I want to bother taking this to the new house? Same with data. Do I want to bother taking this data to the new system? Has it got a purpose? The perfect time to do it, but it's also a huge job. And who among us hasn't moved house with a few boxes that we just went, I'll make a decision about this when I get there. I'll shove it into a box, take it to the next house. We do it with data as well, don't we? We'll just shove that into the new system and we'll decide about it later. And then later never comes along.
There's been a few points made in the chat, and It's a really interesting one. And I think what's clear as well is there isn't an easy answer, but you literally have to just do a whole refresh, and finding time and manpower for that. Again, I'm coming back to it, but that's really hard to find. But if you don't do it, you're going to get caught out even further down the line, and we're going to get more and more incidents that we're hearing, and we are hearing. And today, I'd said right at the beginning of this year on one of our early roundtables, this could prove to be a really difficult year for housing because the media are now on it, and we're seeing that all the time. In terms of the chat, Tony Bradley, coupled with your point earlier about the bottom rungs, don't forget we've become a very throwaway society, which I think is a very important point. We've had to go, which isn't a problem. Dave, having worked on quite a few projects with landlords over the years on systems projects, it's not just the responsibility of data or data sets, but the actual accountability where they struggled, which is a really important point. I'll let you come in on that one, Claire.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Accountability is absolutely key, and is something that's highlighted in the Spotlight report, and is actually one of the principles of GDPR, which is, you know, one of the reasons why I say GDPR is just a data framework. Is it that? Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Is it because people just don't want to be accountable? And I mean, a question back to you, Dave. Why?
Yeah. I mean, in the examples I can see, when I'm talking to management teams and perhaps even boards, there's a fear factor that I'm accountable for the data. Especially when GDPR first came in, I did a talk with Nick Atkin from Yorkshire. He was in Yorkshire at the time, and we were talking about the fear factor of people were starting talking about, if you don't get this right, you can be jailed, and whatever it was it 10%? Your turnover can be fined, etc. So people started doing this. It's my favorite when they go, you do it.
Yeah.
And you know, and the amount of management teams I've seen argue, oh no, I don't really want to touch that. That's not my ball game. But data's the gold, isn't it? That's the thing that they're going to have to realise, Claire. So I'm with you on everything you've said. And you know, I'm an advocate of it as well. So I just think accountability is the thing that needs to be, people need to take that responsibility of being accountable, if that makes any sense.
And the point about the accountability is that the business is accountable anyway. You can't get away from it. So somebody's got to do it.
Yeah.
And if you...
This is coming from the outside looking in, and again, mainly with the recruitment harm. But so many businesses know that they are failing in certain areas, and they're trying to play catch up and trying to get on top of it. So taking accountability, at some point they're going to lose themselves. Like it's going to go, like their head will be on a chopping block that already has the guillotine coming down. And therein lies the problem, because you can try and get ahead of it, but then you are having to step out and go, well, we are doing this wrong. And the only reason that people ever do that is if they are new in a position and then going, right, I'm new, this is what happened before, I'm now here to fix it. And that's another reason for accountability. There's also a huge societal issue with this. And actually, Tom Holden from Joseph Rowntree, who's with us today, good to speak to you, Tom, he said he couldn't agree more with our points on accountability. Joseph Rowntree Housing Trust have started on this journey and have identified that the first big obstacle was accountability. Without clarity on where, with whom the buck stops, the motivation for senior managers to engage with our attempts to introduce proper data governance simply wasn't there. Now those people know they are accountable, suddenly we're getting some traction on the improvements and changes we need to make. And Judith Ratcliffe has mentioned there, here's one tip. If you're handling a right to erasure request, don't migrate the data to the new system you decided you can destroy. It happens so much and it winds your data subjects up no end because you shouldn't have migrated the data. It should have been destroyed. So do be careful to check for shadow data in archives and on old devices. There's a couple
that's
more.
The boxes, isn't it? That's the moving house with the boxes of junk. We'll sort that out later, and we never do.
I think the word accountability comes up on nearly every round table that we've done, Claire, and as everybody else who comes to these regularly knows. What do we do about it? Because as you mentioned earlier, there's not just that, there's the accountability of someone going in, choosing who's vulnerable and who isn't. Or sorry, not who's vulnerable, but who, you know, which need the vulnerability data still attached to them and which don't. That in itself is a huge challenge.
It is. And again, though, I would say that's not something to go straight to. We need to start with mapping out the journey and then looking where all the issues are and then prioritizing the actions. And being able to blink and get the vulnerability data is probably more important. First off, somebody has said that's an issue. Who said that? Sorry, Ellie. Where, you know, the data's there and it's not being used.
Knowing where to store or see the existing data. The call handler
Yeah.
logs a vulnerability in a CRM rather than an alert. So a technician goes out, doesn't access that data through habit, and the job ticket doesn't show it because it wasn't an alert in the first place, so the need gets missed.
So it's something like the lady with the special needs children, the operative's not looking to see if there's anything special about how they need to, you know, approach that, something like that. But Gary, who is on here, actually has had good success with getting the message through to senior leaders about how important data is, where they did, sorry Gary, this is your story, but if you don't mind me telling this, they did a tabletop exercise where they got all the senior leaders in the room and said, pretend we've got no IT. Okay, well, what we'll do is we'll get the backups and we'll start work this afternoon with the backups. And they go, no, the backups have gone. You have got no data for 8 weeks. And that's happened in housing associations that we could all name in the last couple of years. That's not outside the realms of possibility at all. And then they've all gone, we cannot get into the systems for 8 weeks. We are absolutely stuck. And it's really changed their perspective. Another one is something I had somebody speak about on the Hive last week, a couple of weeks ago, the group that I do online, where she talks about engagement surveys, employee engagement surveys, and that it's a really good opportunity to get people on board with how important privacy is, because you start asking your employees to do this anonymous survey, suddenly everyone's going, is it really anonymous? Are they going to know who it is? Are they going to know what I've said? Are they going to be able to work out who I am? And then you go, hang on a minute, if you're concerned, why don't you think our customers should be concerned and be asking those same questions? That's another really good way of doing it. But yeah, just saying to people, okay, do your job without any data. And by data, I mean any information for 8 weeks. And that helps. And I would be more than happy to do that with people as well, to do that sort of exercise.
But I guess then you also see who stands up and who becomes accountable. And I think that's the other challenge within all of this is, and it's part of the board and it's part of the chief exec and it's that senior executive team going, actually, we're going to go and do this, because you can have as many great ideas as you want, but unless it comes top down,
yes,
nothing absolutely change, and we're never going to change it.
Absolutely has to come top down. And sorry, I should have done another little sales at the end, but I will just say that I am planning an event to go into this so much more detail. The whole Kim report for social housing and anyone else that's interested. And our very own Matt Baird has agreed to be a panel member discussing culture. And we're going to do interactive and like really get hands-on. And so lots of networking as well. And it's those connections that are really important. So that's in the autumn. 25th of September is the date to put in your diaries if you are interested.
I'm certainly looking forward to it. I know a couple of people on the chat there have said the project sponsors. So Tony said maybe the project sponsors need to be able to articulate why they need the data. One of the important things I always tried to get to the bottom of why you want it, or do you just want it rather than need it? And Judith fully agrees. It should be the first consideration. Alison, do please come in. It's lovely to see you again.
Hi. I just had a question for Claire. It's a lot to keep track of at the moment. I'm Alison Leach, Head of Governance at Watmos. And especially in my job, I'm thinking about the regulator and then the ombudsman. And you know, there's this new standard coming out. I forget what it's called, but the one around data and tenant. But there doesn't seem to be any reference in the knowledge information. And I just think it would be nice if it, because I guess what will happen with these Kim strategies is everyone will start trying to look at what everyone else is doing. And I would have thought the first thing to look at, it's part of the background and horizon scanning, will be what does the regulator say on this? But it seems a bit disconnected. I just didn't know if you've got any pointers on that.
It is disconnected, yes. And there is a couple of mentions buried in the report where they do mention the access to information scheme. I think that's probably what you're referring to.
I was thinking about the other one as well. There's actually a consumer standard about data and tenant satisfaction measures, which I think is knowledge as well. And I think that doesn't come through.
That again, I think that gets a very brief mention, but it's just a kind of by the by. And that's why I think we can't cherry pick and we can't do little bits and pieces as a knee-jerk reaction. Because if you do just focus on the tenant satisfaction measures, there's the risk of going off and just collecting tons and tons of data. But if you've not got a strategy on how we deal with that data, it just goes off into the, into a big black hole somewhere. So it's coming back to purpose. If you work from the point of purpose on all of these things, you can't go far wrong. It's the very, very starting point. I'm not saying it's easy though, Alison. I'm not saying it's easy by any means, but we need to keep our eye on so many things, but they all fit under a data strategy.
I think the purpose of the tenant satisfaction measures is going to be an interesting one, because some people are going to want the purpose to prove that they're passing it, and some are going to want to prove it to see if they can improve. So people's purpose on those TSMs is going to be really, really interesting. And actually on that, and Alison, I couldn't have thanked you enough, really. Next week is the Social Housing Roundtable Live. So at the moment, I'm still only doing one of these a year, and we do it at the end of day one of the CIH Housing Conference. So we'll be in Manchester. I've put the link in the chat. Tickets are free. Do please sign up. We've got about 3 or 4 left. But I can always get a slightly bigger room if I need to. But it is going to be live. There's going to be about 40 so people there. And the theme for next week is tenant satisfaction, and its links with staff retention and housing culture, and how the 3 are actually consistently intertwined. And obviously data will come into that. But for now, I think Alison's left us with a future roundtable topic, Claire. So that's absolutely superb. So thank you for that, Alison. But what I do want to say is thank you, Claire, for joining us today, for bringing this to the table. I hope anybody catching up on the recording or with us today reaches out. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Find me on LinkedIn. Claire, if you search for Clare Paterson Data Protection, you'll find me. The other Clare Paterson, spelt my way, is a BBC producer. So you don't want that one, you want the data protection one.
Fantastic. Without connecting with 1 T.
Yes, no extra letters. See, I like to minimise my data. So just Claire with no I and Paterson with 1 T.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you to everyone who's new as well that's been able to join us. There is a mailing list and things. Please do reach out to me. I'll tag people on LinkedIn. Reach out if you want to be part of the mailing list. There's the Social Housing Roundtable LinkedIn group where you'll find the recordings, or go to YouTube. And within hopefully a couple of weeks, Spotify podcast, but we'll keep you posted on that. I'm trying to convert it onto Spotify. But for now, as I say, Claire, thank you so much. And here's to next week and to Manchester. But brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for having me. Thanks, everyone.